When Paul introduces the subject of spiritual gifts, he states, "Concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant," in verse 1 of chapter 12. Yet, as I listen to Christians in different places, so many of us do seem to be ignorant on this subject. Now, we might be ignorant of the general subject, but what concerns me more is that many Christians do not seem to know what their spiritual gift is. And I think that that is a great pity, because we ought to know, or at least be trying to find out. So today we're going to begin looking at the details of this subject by reading 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verses 4 to 11. Now there are diversities of gifts but the same Spirit. And there are differences of administrations but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another divers kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the self-same Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will. So maybe the first question we should be asking is, what is a spiritual gift? I think that we're inclined to think of a gift in terms of something special or particularly notable, and it might be in some cases. Now, for example, I am learning to play the flute, and you would know that I'm just a beginner. But if you were to hear someone who was really good, you might say he or she is really gifted. However, I think that if we import that idea into our subject, we rather miss the point. So the word that Paul uses when he writes, "there are diversities of gifts" in verse 4, is a Greek word that means something that has been given to you freely, like a gratuity. And because it is given to you, it is something for which you are fitted. What is the something? In verses 4 to 6, Paul writes about diversities of gifts, differences of administrations, diversities of operations. These three words together indicate that in terms of the body, Paul has a reasonably broad range of things in mind when he refers to gifts. It includes the ideas of role, function, and activity. Gifts, service, activity may be the three ideas. Some might be very visible and others might be low key. But these many different roles and functions in the body are all necessary. So Paul writes that the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal in verse 7. In other words, given for the common good. The Corinthians may have thought that the manifestation of the Spirit was seen purely in the exercise of the miraculous gifts, but Paul is showing that it is displayed in the benefit that it brings to the members. I need to remember that I have a role or function in the body, not for my own sake, but for the body's sake, for the blessing of the body. Now, I want you to notice that the emphasis in chapter 12 is not on the Lord, as we saw in chapter 11, but on the Holy Spirit. 5 times we're reminded that although there are many gifts, they are bestowed by the same Spirit, verses 4, 8, 9, and 11. Now, the important point is that the distribution of the gifts, whether miraculous or more mundane, is determined not by the Corinthians, but by the Holy Spirit. That is why Paul concludes, dividing to every man severally as he will, in verse 11. The allocation of the gifts is according to the will of God. It's not according to our will. Like Paul, we need to be asking, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? As in Acts chapter 9, verse 6. May the Lord bless these scriptures to us all.